Check the description for the following discount codes. So today we're looking at what's to be a competitor really for the entry-level Logitech stuff, G920, G29, G923 really, but G923 is priced a bit strong because of the True Force add-on, which really doesn't add anything to it at all. You're still better off with a G920 or G29. So this is what this is really designed to compete with. And the bottom line is, you shouldn't buy this, you should buy the Logitech. It's just nowhere near as good for an entry-level, gear-driven wheelbase, and the pedals just aren't really up to much either. So that's the TLDR from this video. Stick with me if you want to find out exactly why. So first things first, the price is the biggest problem here. This is just shy of £300, £289.99. So you get the wheelbase, you get a shifter, and you get the pedals I showed you a second ago. So that's directly comparable to a G920, which is currently £238.99. So there's a 50 quid price difference in favour of the Logitech, and the Logitech stuff is also better. The build quality of this is the PXN V10. I reviewed one of the PXN wheels a while ago. I think it might have been the V9, which was a non-force feedback wheel. And for like 80 quid or 90 quid, whatever it was actually half decent. For that sort of, that's no money, you can't expect much. That was actually all right. So I thought when I got this, or when they were releasing this, it might actually be half decent. And a reasonable competitor for the Logitech stuff, but unfortunately it's just not. I'll give you a close-up of the base itself. I don't think it looks terrible. It does have a quick release, similar in style to what the Thrustmaster stuff does, where you've just got a collar that you screw on. At the back there, we've got the input for the shifter and the pedals, and the USB is hardwired, and then the input for the power supply at the bottom. And then there is a physical switch which flicks between 900 degrees and 270 degrees. I was curious whether that was like a physical stop on the wheel, but it's not. When you engage that switch, the force feedback motor physically stops the wheel from turning as much as it can do beyond 270 degrees. Obviously, this only has a couple of Newton meters of torque, so you can force past it if you wanted to. So yeah, build quality wise, it's average to low. The quick release feels particularly flimsy to me. We do have a nice collection of screws with heads that aren't quite centered like we often see on cheaper stuff, but it's not terrible. You've got like a metal base plate here, which is what will bolt down to your rig. That then bolts into the sides of the wheelbase itself, and this is kind of just like an aesthetic shroud over the top that's plastic. It doesn't really serve any purpose, it's just there for looks as far as I can tell. The actual housing of the motor itself is plastic, and even where this metal base plate bolts onto the sides, that is also plastic. Now I haven't taken it apart, so I don't know if that bolts directly into the motor inside or not. Perhaps it does, that would be a sensible thing to do. But again, at sort of 2 to 2.5 Newton meters or whatever this actually is, I can't remember the exact figure they claim, you don't need much in the way of structural rigidity really, as long as it's not flapping around and wobbling and flexing all over the place, which it doesn't do, at least not the base. There is an awful lot of play in the shaft itself, and I'll put a clip of me demonstrating that with the wheel attached up now. You can see there's quite a lot of up and down and left to right play. It actually reminded me of checking a turbocharger for wear, because if you've got a turbocharger with like a wet floating bearing, a little bit of up and down and side to side play is fine until the oil pressure's up and it centers itself and it's spinning, but you're not allowed any in and out play. That would be terrible. This doesn't have any in and out play either, but it does have a lot of up and down, and that's just not really, not really of any good at all, especially compared to the Logitech that doesn't have that. The wheel itself looks quite nice. It's extremely light. You know, there's nothing, the only thing that's metal on here is this faceplate here. The material feels okay. The stitching is average, again to low. You know, you've got little bits here that are just kind of not quite finished how they should be. The buttons themselves, they feel different from one another. So some of them have like a click and others don't have that click and they move further. So these ones have very little travel and click, whereas like these other ones move a lot further and feel much softer under the fingers. And you've got this bizarre layout for like what you would normally have as a D-pad on a steering wheel, like a Logitech one, for example. Very, very weird choice to do that. I mean, the buttons aren't even like up and down or offset for some strange reason. It's just not, I don't know who looked at that and went, yeah, we'll just throw them arrows loosely around there. You know, they'll be all right. So that's a bit weird. The material actually feels okay. And you've got the little metal band at the top again, just like the Logitech one does. The D-shaped wheel, bit odd for a one-size-fits-all wheel, but again, we saw that recently with Logitech and their direct drive one, like, bit odd. If you're going to do one-size-fits-all, just make it round. Again, like the Logitech G920 or G29 does. The buttons themselves, they are, I was about to say they're all level and centered, but they're not actually. Referencing like the orientation of them. L3 and R3 are all a little bit wonky, one's off to the left, one's off to the right. But again, we've got physical buttons that are completely not even aligned, so that's not really unexpected, is it? The paddles have a fair bit of play before they actually click. So click, click, and all this before it. All that movement, and then finally click. So that's not the best. They also, I think they are metal, but they just feel very, very cheap. Analog paddles at the bottom that you might use for clutches or whatever else you feel like. They function, they do work, but again, feel very, very cheap. And the problem is when it's nigh on £300, they could do with feeling a little better than this, really. Overall, the build quality just isn't there compared to the Logitech offering, which is £50 cheaper anyway. But everything does function. And referencing the quick release, you've just got your pogo pins there, and then here's your thread. And again, just like with the Thrustmaster stuff, there is actually also a key to go in the keyway here. You slot it on like that, and then you just do it up. In fairness, it's actually a little quicker than the Thrustmaster one, because the Thrustmaster one has that Phillips screw that just sticks into the side and looks ugly, and you have to physically pull out a screwdriver for. This hasn't come undone in my testing, but yeah, that's how that attaches. Now, I don't think you'll see the play. No, I won't be able to demonstrate here, but you see it in that clip I put up earlier. So overall, build quality of the wheelbase and the steering wheel, very low, not great at all. The smoothness of it is gear driven like the Logitech, so we're going to expect a little bit of noise and obviously some distinct cogging. But this is a level up from the cogging we get on the Logitech. This literally feels like it just grinds. And in use, I'll put up some clips of me testing it in a couple of different titles. But it feels, I mean, it doesn't sound too bad over the microphone. But in use, it feels absolutely awful. It's noticeably like more coggy than what the Logitech one is. You know, it's just not a nice experience. The force feedback itself, I would say it's probably not quite as strong as the Logitech wheelbase. And one of the other big issues we have is there's no drivers for this. So Windows recognises it as either direct input or X input, and you can flick between those two by holding down the PXN button on the front of the wheel, depending what games you want to play with it. So you have no driver controls whatsoever, like you would normally get with a force feedback steering wheel. And the other problem with this is that some titles just don't seem to give you any force feedback. Dirt Rally, for example, which is one of my my favourite games, just doesn't work. I tried everything I could. I had a Google around to see other people saying the same thing. But yeah, Dirt Rally just doesn't send force feedback to this wheel, or Windows doesn't take the the data from Dirt Rally and pass it using direct input to the wheel. It just does nothing. It's just a floppy wheel. So not only is the force feedback, when it does work, like in ACC, pretty bad and very grindy and not very strong. There's also mass oscillation. I don't know if I got a video clip of this or not, but if I did, I'll put it up now. It just seems to oscillate like mad if your car is even slightly moving. If you're sat still, the wheel doesn't oscillate, but the moment you move off the line, it just seems to oscillate. And the faster you go, the more it oscillates. And because there's no drivers, there's no adjustments. You can't do anything about it apart from like move the slider perhaps in game. And I think I found if I the more force feedback I took out, as in the overall strength, the less it oscillated. And that's quite common if you were to have force feedback too high on wheelbases. But this isn't a strong wheelbase, so taking out some of the available torque to get it to stop oscillating just leaves you with a really limp wheel that you might as well not bother with. So yeah, no drivers, doesn't work in all titles. When it does work in the titles that it doesn't work well. There's a lot of play in the motor shaft itself. It's very, very grindy. The overall build quality is low. So that's the wheelbase and the steering wheel. Oh, it comes with a little power supply. I guess if anyone's interested in what it's actually rated to, 1.2 amps maximum. Oh no, that's the input, sorry. Output 24 volts, 2 amps, 48 watts. The actual build quality of the PSU is pretty good, aside from the cable they've chosen. It's adequate and it's fine, but it just doesn't look that well from a presentation point of view. But the actual housing of this little PSU and the text printed on it is not bad at all. But yeah, choice of wire. It's relatively stiff cable, again, a bit indicative of cheapness, so not the best. You do get a whole array of USB cables, RJ12 cables, DIN plugs to, because it supports consoles, so PlayStations, Xboxes, as well as your PC, and you can plug your pedals, which we'll show in a minute, into the bass, and the shifter as well, which is what we'll look at very briefly. Now, those cables aren't bad quality, actually. It also comes with Allen key and bolts for bolting your pedals in place. It doesn't come with any bolts for the wheelbase to bolt to your rig, though. Oh, I suppose I should also mention there is table clamps. Should anyone actually want to buy this, the table clamps do work just fine. The way they operate is to, that's the wrong one. They slot on the top, cack-handed. They slot on the top basically like that. And then there's a bolt here that you can do up to clamp it to your desk. Not the biggest opening in the world, but probably enough for most desks. Again, should you decide to buy one of these for £50 more than a Logitech offering. I don't know, maybe you're in a country where you can't get the Logitech G920 or G29, in which case this might be your only option. But even then, it's still not a great option because it doesn't work in all the games, which is a real drawback, obviously. So yeah, the shifter itself. The shifter, when I reviewed the PXN one, it's the same shifter. I actually prefer this shifter to the Logitech one. It's much stiffer in operation. Logitech one feels very toy-like, and you have a couple of extra buttons there, one to use as a parking brake, one to switch between high and low ratios if you're doing lorry-related stuff. Again, you've got a table clamp here. There is no hard mounting option for this, unlike Logitech one, which there is. But the actual operation definitely feels nicer, in my opinion, and you have a push-down reverse. Longevity-wise, of course, with anything that's a little bit cheap and Chinese like this, you're never going to know. But this actually feels pretty decent. This is probably my favourite thing out of the whole bundle, actually. Apart from I like the way the wheel looks, so that's quite nice appearance-wise. But this is actually a pretty decent little shifter. What have you got? I suppose you might want to know. It's got 6 gears and then reverse. So, should you be interested, it's not a 7-speed like the Fanatic, for example. And there's no sequential option either. You would need to do the same modification I showed for the Logitech one, which is elongate those screws and put a hairband or a a big O-ring around the shaft, so it centers itself. If you haven't seen that, it's in my videos somewhere. One of the earliest videos I put up, even before I decided to actually make a channel. So here's the pedals. You might well go, hold on a minute, Carl, you look like you're holding a set of Thrustmaster pedals, and you would be forgiven for thinking so, because they are very much an obvious copy of the Thrustmaster TLCMs, but without a load cell and without really any metal on here at all either. I think this, what should be like tread plate, I think that's actually it is plastic, yeah, definitely. The base, everything is all plastic, 4 screws what secure this. I think it's even the same bolt pattern as the Thrustmaster TLCMs. At the back you have RJ12 and USB, depending how you want to run them. The springs have preload adjustment by adjusting these nuts here, big plastic nuts, you can wind them up and down. I've gone for maximum preload on all 3 pedals. The brake pedal is actually a reasonable amount of force, but just like the TLCMs, these feel ridiculously springy in operation, and they're all just plasticky and a little bit pony, in fairness. There's nothing really good about them. You can move the faces left and right. You can actually move them up as well by taking them off. That way, if you wanted to have the pedals mounted in, you know, like this sort of thing, you can shift these up there to give you a better angle on them as well. They are Hall effect sensors rather than potentiometers, so that's something, but they're not good pedals. Obviously, the clutch is linear. Every pedal does have a different weight to it. So the clutch is heavier than the accelerator, and the brake is heavier than the clutch, and then obviously the accelerator. But it's all just cheap, and it even sounds cheap and nasty. And the thing is, they're not that cheap, you know. They're just shy of 300 notes. So just have a proper close-up look. You know, you can see what you get in here. Again, if you're in a country where you can't get Logitech for whatever reason, and this is your only option, the pedals do at least work. All 3 of them do at least feel different. They do slip on carpet because there's no weight to them. They're really light, and you've just got 4 rubber feet, one on each corner. So not great on carpet, not great bolted down, in fairness. But you know, I think I use my GT Amiga Titan to test all my stuff on, so that's what you see it all bolted to in this video. But yeah, I mean, we get a manual with it, which is half Chinese, half English. It's not bad. Oh, there's also a QR code to scan in here, and then there is a mobile phone app which actually gives you a little more adjustment for the force feedback. Let's see if it will let me load it up without this being plugged in. It shows you a PXN V12 actually on there. I'm not familiar with what that one is, but you scroll across to the PXN V10, you press go. Oh yeah, I think it's trying to connect to my wheel, which of course it isn't going to be able to do because it's not powered up. But you basically, it allowed you to turn the strength of the force feedback up and down, and a couple of other minor adjustments. I think you can test things like the pedal input and stuff like that. Yeah, it's not going to let me show you because obviously it can't connect to it. But the bottom line is, it's not very good. It would have been far better to have proper drivers with proper adjustment, because that way you would assume it would have worked in all titles rather than only working in some of them. So overall, I'm a little disappointed. Their £90 PX9 offering, or whatever the hell it was called, V9 offering from PXN, was actually all right for the money. You know, you pay little money and you don't get much for it. That's fine, that's what you expect. This bundle with the wheel, the shifter, and the pedals is 300 notes, and we've got to directly compare it to Logitech stuff because Logitech stuff is £50 cheaper right now, and it's just better in every way. Nice little force feedback that actually works in all titles, you know, and with the Logitech stuff, in most games, it's going to be recognised straight out of the box because it's been around for years, and every game is designed to work with a Logitech G920 or G29 steering wheel. The wheel itself is nicer on the Logitech one. This, you know, it's just a bit flimsy, a bit cheap. The paddles and everything are all just bad. Quick release feels flimsy. There's a load of play in the shaft. It does at least bolt down and fit fine to my GT Amiga Titan. I didn't have to drill any holes to make that fit. The power supply seems reasonable construction, albeit with a cheap cable coming out of it. The shifter, I really like the shifter. Logitech could learn a little bit by making their entry-level shifter more like this one. At least, you know, in testing. Who knows whether it actually stand the test of time like the Logitech one does. And with the pedals, you know, they copied the TLCMs, which are already bad pedals for the money, in my opinion, and they've made them worse by having poor construction and poor functionality. So unfortunately, you know, thanks to PXN for sending it over, but it's not something I can recommend to people in countries where you can get the Logitech options from for less money. Again, and that would include their pedals and their shifter as well, literally looking on Amazon here, you know, right in front of me. So if you're in the market for an entry-level complete bundle, there will be a link to the Logitech there. If for some reason you desperately want to buy this and it's your only choice, then there will be a link to this on Amazon as well. All links help support the channel with a small amount of commission earned. But I don't really recommend you buy this unless you absolutely have to, because it just isn't very good for the money. If this was all 150 quid, I'd be like, it's still bad, but it's super cheap for a complete force feedback setup. So go for it, take your chances. But unfortunately, it's just shy of 300 notes. So gets a thumbs down from me. Anyway, as always, thank you very much for watching and take it easy.